Hey guys, welcome back to the 51st episode of the Huggy Poker Vlog. For this one, we are going to be heading back to the Lodge in Round Rock, Texas for the Poker Traveler and Boston Jimmy meetup game. If you're not familiar with these guys, they both played quite a bit on the Lodge live stream, and Poker Traveler in particular has made some deep runs this year in some tournament series, including the World Series main event. For the meetup game, we're going to be playing some 1-3 limit holdem with a $1,000 max buy-in, so we're going to go ahead and buy in for the max and jump into the action. Let's see how it goes. Not even 10 minutes in, we've got our first interesting hand of the night when we pick up pocket queens on the button. There's a $6 straddle, and the +1 player raises to 21. It folds around to us, and I raised a little more than 3x, making it $75. It folds back to the original raiser, who takes literally no time at all to 3-bet to $200. I'm not particularly happy with this spot, given how fast he acted. If our opponent had us covered, then I'd say there's an argument between calling or shoving all in at this point, but it's definitely hard to justify folding since we don't have any reads at this point. With that said, our opponent appears to be pretty short stacked, so I really think that leaves us with just one move. All in?
All in.
I push all in, and our opponent snap calls.
You got ace king? Okay. You're probably ahead of me then. That's not what I wanted to see. That's especially not what I wanted to see. A jack would be nice. Well, good hand.
We get a count, and our opponent's got $708 in his stack, so we do get a little bit of a discount at least. Still, it's always a bit disheartening to start off your session being down almost a full buy-in. I rebuy for $700 to bring us back to an almost $1,000 stack, and hopefully we can run a little bit better from here. Boston Jimmy joins our table, and he immediately throws a $100 chip in the middle, saying we're gonna run a PLO race. There's no betting, no action, everyone gets a PLO hand, and we run a full board to see who wins the $100 chip. It's a pretty generous notion when you consider that Boston Jimmy is going to each table as part of the meetup game and offering this out of his own pockets.
I got a damn good starting hand. Oh, there's a jack. There's a jack. Yes.
A lot of shared cards here.
Oh, I got 2 sets. I got a super yacht. Is there 9-10? 9-10 got there.
9-10 got there. 9-10.
Oh, damn it.
I got a straight.
Oh. I had my own outs. I know. Oh, that's rough.
That's funny. That's funny.
So unfortunately, we flop the nuts and the second nuts, but we've got our own outs on pairing the board for a boat. The straight comes in, and our neighbor takes the prize. 15 minutes later, we're in a PLO double board bomb pot. We've got ace-9 4-deuce with hearts, and there's 8 players to the flop. It comes down 3 jack-9 with 2 diamonds on top and 4-4-8 rainbow on bottom. So we end up flopping trips with the best possible kicker on the bottom board. We're only losing to 8-4 or pocket 8s at this point. The player on our right opens for $50, and there's no reason to raise here since we're only good on one of the 2 boards. Trying to get in here against a single opponent would probably result in a chop pot at best. I just call, and everyone else ends up folding, so it turns out we're heads up anyway. The turn brings the king of hearts on top and the 6 of clubs on bottom, so our hand's unchanged on both boards. Our opponent leads out quickly for almost pot, making it $160. From his demeanor, I can tell he really likes his hand. It's possible he hit the straight, but he liked his hand since the flop, and I'm actually thinking he's a fan of the second board, meaning he might actually have us crushed here. Since we're only winning half the pot at best, and I'm not even certain that we're good on that board, I make what feels like perhaps a tight fold throwing our hand in. But I throw out a comment in the process, hoping to get him to show his hand.
Alright, I'll let you have it. You got the 4, huh? I folded a 4 with an ace kicker. Nice hand.
He shows pocket 8s for the flop boat, meaning we were drawing to exactly 1 out on the bottom board, as well as being behind his pair of jacks on the top board. So we actually just saved ourselves a good bit of money with this fold. Our stacks dwindled a little bit more from a few other bomb pots and missed flops that we got played back at, so I end up topping off for another $300, bringing our total buy-in to $2K at this point. It's about this time that we pick up King 4 suited and diamonds in middle position. There's a $6 straddle, a $1 dead blind, and a $3 missed big blind posted behind us. Action folds to us, and I raise to $20 with our suited king. The player who posted folds, the button makes the call, and the straddle calls. So we've got 3 players to the flop, which comes down ace, queen, deuce, rainbow. The straddle checks dark, and we're definitely going to c-bet here since this board is pretty good for our pre-flop raising range. I bet a little less than half pot for $30. The button folds, meaning we've got position on the hand now, and the straddle checks his cards before making the call. The turn probably doesn't change much as it brings the 5 of spades. Granted, there are some straight and flush possibilities on the board now. We get checked to again, and I decide to fire a second bullet, making it $75 this time. The straddle snap calls, and we get to see a river, which is the 6 of spades, bringing in the backdoor flush. Our opponent checks a third time, and with some Broadway straight draws missing, the wheel straight missing, except for 4-3 specifically, and the fact that we've got the range advantage over a lot of hands our opponent could have here, I decide to fire a third bullet in hopes of getting some weaker pairs to fold. I make it $175, and our opponent pretty quickly pushes his cards forward. Our triple barrel does the trick, and we finally scoop a decent sized pot for the night. A few hands later, we've got ace deuce suited in the big blind. The first player to act raises to $12, the next player calls, and our same opponent from the last hand, who I've gotten the impression is a pretty loose player at this point, makes a small 3-bet to $35 in the cutoff. None of these raises seem particularly strong, and this would probably be a good spot to raise with our suited connected ace in the big blind, but I end up just cold calling instead, expecting that the players behind will probably just do the same. The under the gun player surprises me by 3-betting despite his pretty small initial raise, making it $100 straight. The player behind him folds, and the 3-better calls. So it's back on us now. It's $65 to call with a pot of about $250, giving us about 4-1 on a call here. I know our ace is not great. We do have a connected ace, it's suited, so I end up making the call, and we take a flop. It comes down 5-3-5 with 2 spades. It's almost a good flop for us. We've got a gut shot. Any 4 would give us a straight. I check, and the player to our left c-bets for $85. The loose player quickly calls, and it's back on us. We're not getting the right odds to call here, but considering the implied odds if we hit, I expect we could stack one of these opponents if either of them has an overpair. And if it turns out we're just up against ace high, then perhaps we could play back at them if action slows down. So I go ahead and make a loose call. The turn brings the 6 of diamonds, so the board's becoming a bit more connected, and it's definitely a board that more favors our range from the big blind compared to the other 2 players. I check again, and after about 20 seconds of thinking, the player behind us slows down and checks back. The loose player instantly checks back as well, and now I'm thinking that we're probably up against a big ace and maybe a weak overpair, but more likely a draw of some sort. As we get a free 10 of clubs on the river and the obvious flush draw misses, I'm thinking maybe we could take this away with a strong bet. I overbet the pot, pushing all in, putting our opponents to the test. The player to our left folds, and the kind of loose player takes a bit longer to think through the action and whether his hand's good. Eventually, after making us sweat for a bit, he relents, folding pocket 9s face up. I show our hand, and he says that he had a hunch, but just couldn't pull the trigger, so our aggression works, and we take down a pretty big pot. 20 minutes later, we've got King Jack suited in the small blind. Boston Jimmy straddles to $10, action folds to the cutoff who limps in, and the button limps behind. We've got a pretty strong hand here, especially against what looks like weak late position limps, so I decided to go for a raise, making about a pot-sized bet of $60. Just the original limper in the cutoff calls, so we're heads up to the flop. And it's a pretty good one for our hand as it comes down 10-Jack-5 with 2 diamonds, giving us top pair second kicker. I put out a c-bet of $75 and our opponent snap calls. The turn's a total brick with an offsuit deuce, and given the action, I'm inclined to continue here to prevent any flush or straight draws from getting a free card. I make it $200 and our opponent pushes all in. We make an easy call here since he's only got about $250 or so behind, show our hand, and he flips up pocket queens for an overpair to our jacks. So we're drawing to 6 out on the rivers, and unfortunately we don't improve, so we end up giving back pretty much everything that we started to recuperate from our early losses. Poker Traveler ended up joining our table just a bit ago, and we end up playing this next hand against him. We've got 8-7 suited in the +1 position. The first player min raises to $6, and we've got a nice suited connector hand, so I bump it up to 25. The player behind us folds, and Poker Travel in middle position 4 bets, though I think with the under the gun min raise, we can more effectively treat this as a 3-bet, making it $75. It folds back to us, and I feel like with us being in early position, we can put on the pressure to basically say, hey, I've got a really good hand here. With that, I decide to come back over the top, settling on a raise size of $280. Unfortunately, I somehow missed that the 8 seat had actually cold called Poker Traveler's 3-bet, meaning our 4-bet size is not very good. It doesn't account for the extra bet at all, and it's giving both players much better odds on a call here. Poker Traveler's in the tank for probably a good minute or so, and unsurprisingly, after thinking, he does make the call while the last player folds. So we're heads up to a not so great flop of 9-8 Queen Rainbow. We're kind of in an awkward predicament of a spot now where we can either check or shove. There's no bet sizing in between that makes sense. Since we've at least made a pair now, I don't think we can check fold since he could exploit us with any 2 cards, so I go ahead and just push all in hoping to take it down. We get snap called and he quickly flips up pocket queens for top set. We're in really bad shape, only drawing to backdoor straight and flush draws. He offers to run it twice, but I decline as I've been more on board with just running things once in most spots lately. So we don't improve and we make a massive punt here, unfortunately. There's a part of me that wonders, with how long Poker Traveler took to call before the flop, was there a part of him that thought our 4-bet looked strong and that his queens might be dominated? If I had noticed the cold call in between his 3-bet and our 4-bet and accounted for it in our raise size, I'm curious if we might have gotten a fold and been able to take it down with a strong looking bluff. But I guess we'll never know. A rebuy again for $1,000, and we're in for $3K total now, $2K in the hole. We don't pick up much of anything for the next 30 minutes until finally we look down at pocket aces on the button. Action folds to the same loose player from a couple hands ago, who raises to $23 in the +2 position. It folds over to us, and I put in 3-bet, making it $75. The blinds get out of the way, and the original raiser instantly 4-bets to $200. He's clearly got a monster with how quickly he put the money in, and we've got the best of it, so it's time to get the money in ourselves. I posture for a few seconds before throwing a chip in and announcing, "All in." He snap calls and asks if we got aces before showing that he's got pocket kings.
Yeah.
We get a full run out, and it's clean. Our opponent's got us covered, so we get a full double up. Our stack's finally heading the right direction. 10 minutes later, we straddle $6, and the player behind us restraddles to 12. The loose player on the button limps in, and both blinds complete. We look down at ace-jack offsuit in the straddle, and I feel like our hand's a little too strong to let a bunch of random hands in for free. Raising to isolate against ideally 1 or maybe 2 opponents is probably our best play here. I make it $65. The second straddler quickly makes the call, the loose limper on the button calls, the small blind folds, and the big blind calls, so we only managed to get 1 player out of the pot with a much bigger pot for our ace high at this point. The flop comes down 8-6-4 with 2 hearts, a pretty miserable one for our raising range in general, not to mention the fact that half the table decided to take a flop. When the big blind leads for $150, I don't think there's anything to do here other than fold. The player on our left goes all in for a little less than $250, the button folds, and the big blind who let out snap calls. We see the ace come out on the turn, which feels pretty bad given the hand we just folded. That is, until we see the big blind flip up 7-6 in hearts for a flop straight flush draw that river trips. 25 minutes later, we've got ace-deuce offsuit in the hijack. The first player folds, and the loose player in the +1 seat raises to 16. Both players call behind, and now it's on us. We've got an ace, but in all honesty, it's about the worst possible ace we could have. It's not even suited, and we'll almost never have the nuts with this hand. If we flop an ace, it's hard to know if we're good, and even if we hit 2-pair, we'll often lose to a lot of bigger 2-pair holdings. I've been playing a lot tighter since this was recorded, folding hands like this one, but at the time, I decided to make the call and join along. The cutoff and button call, and both blinds fold, so we've got 6 players with a flop. It comes down King Jack Ace Rainbow, so we immediately run into one of those spots that I just talked through, where we've got top pair, but it's really hard to know if we're good, especially on a board as coordinated as this one. The first 3 players check to us, and I take the passive route checking back. We're not getting better hands to fold with a bet, and I don't want to bloat the pot with our weak ace. It checks around, and we get a free turn, which is an offsuit deuce, completing the rainbow. So we do pick up 2-pair now, though we're still losing to ace-king or ace-jack for a bigger 2-pair, queen-10 for the straight, or even a set. The loose player leads out for $30, and the next player folds. The player to our right calls, and I think we could call a raise here. This is a pretty small bet, and I imagine a hand that's beating ours would probably bet a bit bigger to make up for lost value on the flop checking round. Still, with this being a rainbow board, there aren't too many rivers I'm worried about, and even if the board pairs, we'd be chopping with most other aces at this point. I make the call, and the cutoff and button fold. So we're down to 3 for the river, which is essentially a brick with the 8 of diamonds. The only hand that helps that we were beating on the turn is ace-8. The loose player leads again, pretty small for $50, which is really only about 25% of the pot. The player to our right folds, and we definitely can't fold here. I don't know that it's worth raising, though, since I don't want to take myself to value town, so I just throw in the chips to call. Our hand is good, and we take it down. 30 minutes later, we're under the gun, and we straddle to $6. There's 3 limps, the big blind calls, and we look down at 7-5 offsuit, so I think we've got a pretty straightforward check with our option here. And it definitely feels like things are looking up as the flop smashes us in the face with 8-6-4 with 2 spades. So we flop the absolute nuts with a straight. The first 2 players check, and the loose player leads for $25. The player to our right folds, and we're definitely raising here to charge any draws. I make it $100. It folds back to the loose player, who quickly calls, and we're heads up to the turn. We see an offsuit 9, so we're downgraded to the second nuts, only losing to 10-7, though it's pretty unlikely our opponent has that exact hand. He checks to us this time, and I put out a pretty big bet of $200 since I don't want the flush draw to get there cheaply. He flashes us ace-8 for top pair top kicker on the flop and throws his hand in. So our bet was certainly a bit too big for his exact hand, unfortunately, but I'm still happy to scoop in another one. Another 30 minutes pass before we pick up pocket nines in the small blind. There's a $6 straddle, and the end of the gun player who's been playing an incredibly straightforward game raises to $15. The cutoff calls, and the loose player on the button 3-bets to 40. It's a pretty small raise, and when we look down at pocket nines in the small blind, I'm inclined to make the call here. The tight opener makes the call, and the last player calls as well, so we've got 4 of us to the flop. We flop our first set of the night as the flop comes down 10-9 ace rainbow. Action checks around to the loose player in position, who makes about a half pot size bet for $82. I'm halfway in between raising and just calling here. I end up just going with a call, hoping to make our hand look weak against the loose player, giving him the chance to continue his story. In retrospect, I think going for a raise right away might be the better play, given that the board is somewhat coordinated, there are still 2 players left to act, and it's going to be hard for a big ace to fold on this board. The other 2 players do end up making the fold though, so we're heads up to the turn. And it's not the greatest card as it brings the 8 of diamonds. Queen Jack now beats us if our opponent happened to be c-betting with a straight draw. Granted, I doubt he would have 3-bet with such a hand pre-flop, so I don't think we can assume we're beat here for any reason. I check again, and he immediately makes it $200. I don't think we can wait any longer, it's time to pull the trigger. I check raise all in, and he snap calls with about $550 or so behind.
Oh. You got top set? Oh, that's a setup, that flop. Yeah, you too. Yeah, that was just a lucky flop, man.
We pick up an over $1,800 pot, the biggest one of the night for us so far. About an hour passes before this next interesting hand. Our table's gotten to be more short-handed at this point in the night with only 5 of us at the table. The first player straddles the $6 and we re-straddle in the cutoff to 12. The button raises to 30 first to act and it folds back to us. We don't have a great hand, but with it being short-handed, I decide to make the call for only $18 more. We're heads up to the flop, which comes down 9-3-10 rainbow, so we end up flopping second pair with a backdoor straight draw. I check, and our opponent c-bets for 30. We make a straightforward call, and the turn hits us hard with the Queen of Hearts. So we pick up 2 pair now, which is most likely the best hand. We're really only losing to Queen 10 or King Jack at this point. I consider leading, but I decide to check again, giving our opponent the chance to continue the story. He makes it $55, and now it's just a question of how much we want to raise. I settle on $175, and after about 20 seconds, he eventually makes the call. We're just hoping for a clean river, but we get quite the opposite of that as it brings the Jack of Hearts, putting 4 to a straight on the board, as well as bringing in the backdoor flush. I don't think we can do much other than check here, and our opponent makes it $200. Ugh, what a gross spot. This bet definitely looks like value. We're really not beating anything at this point.
Alright, I'll give it to you. Nice bet. Oh, that river saved me money then. I had two pair.
Our opponent flashes King Jack suited for the turn straight. So we got pretty fortunate that A, he didn't come over the top on the turn because we definitely would have gotten the money in there, and B, that the river saved us from putting any more money into the pot with what felt like a pretty strong hand on the turn. 10 minutes later, we're down to 4 players at this point when we pick up ace-3 offsuit first to act. I'll raise pretty much any ace with it being this short-handed, and I make it $12. The player to our left 3-bets to 35, and the blinds both fold. I go ahead and make the call, so we're heads up to the flop. It comes down 3-9-4 rainbow, giving us bottom pair. I check, and our opponent c-bets for $35. We're not going anywhere with our pair to 1-bet, and I quickly make the call. And the turn's just about the best one we could ask for, as it brings the ace of clubs, giving us top and bottom pair now. I check again, and our opponent continues the story, making it $65 this time. I don't want to slow play any further, as I'm expecting this ace is probably good for our opponent, or at least the hand he's representing. I check raise on the bigger side, making it $225. After about a minute of thinking, we eventually get the call. And the river couldn't get much better as it brings the 3 of hearts, giving us a boat. He's only got maybe a pot-sized bet or so behind, so I think there's only one move here.
All in?
$1.
He doesn't take too long before flashing ace-jack suited and throws it into the muck. So, good fold by our opponent, but unfortunately we don't get any more value on this one. 2 hands later, there's a $6 straddle, and the loose player raises to $15 on the button. The small blind calls, and we've got 5 deuce suited in the big blind. Not a great hand, but it's suited. We're short-handed, so I make the call, and the straddle calls as well, so we've got 4 players to the flop. It comes down deuce 8-7 rainbow. We all check to the pre-flop raiser, who instantly c-bets for $45. The small blind folds, and I make a loose call with bottom pair and some backdoor draws. The last player folds, and we're heads up now. The turn's not much help to our hands as it brings the 9 of diamonds. I check again, and he makes another pretty quick bet, this time for $60. His bet looks a little bit on the weaker side, and I imagine this board is probably getting scarier from his perspective. There's a lot of strong hands we could easily have here, like 2 pair or a straight. I decide to take advantage of that, and I check raise to $200. We get a quick call, which we're obviously not happy to see, and the river brings an offsuit jack. Well, we're not winning by showing down here. We were representing a strong hand on the turn, and if that happened to be a straight, then this card shouldn't have changed anything. I'm just hoping that he didn't improve on this river as well with the 10 in his hand. I fire one last bullet for $325, and our opponent throws his cards into the muck faster than we can even put the chips out. Our aggression takes down a big pot that we almost certainly would have lost otherwise. The very next hand, we're involved in a PLO double board bomb pot. We've got ace, king, jack, 7 with spades, and there's 6 players to the flop. It comes down queen, 10, jack with 2 clubs on top, and 7, jack, queen, rainbow on bottom. So we flop the absolute nuts with Broadway on top, and we've got bottom 2 pair on the bottom board. The second player to act leads out for $40, and the loose player right behind her makes the call. The player on our right folds, and I pot it, making it $220. It folds back to the original better who folds, and the loose player immediately calls. The turn brings the 6 of spades on top and the 7 of hearts on bottom, so we've still got the nuts on top along with the redraw to the king high spade flush now. On bottom, we managed to improve to a boat, 7's full of jacks, so we're feeling pretty good about our hand at this point. We get checked too, and I pot it again for $280, which is the max limit for bomb pots at this game due to a $500 cap. We get snap called, and we're hoping to fade a spade or club on the top board. We see the king of diamonds and the queen of spades. The river's clean, and I announce our hand. He shows 9, 8, 7, 6 with 2 clubs for both flush and straight draws on the flop, both of which missed with turn trips on the bottom board. His hand is no good versus our boat and Broadway, and we scoop both boards. Almost 5 hours in, and we're finally in the black for this session. Well, that was a little bit of a roller coaster of a session. We had the pocket queens versus kings hand early, a little bit of a cooler there, and then we fell victim to fancy play syndrome as we tried to 4-bet poker traveler with our 8-7 suited hand. Didn't work out for us. We punted off quite a bit. We were down 2,000 in the hole, and over the course of the 5.5 hours that we played, we managed to make quite a comeback, thankfully. So we bought in for $3,000 in all. We ended up with a chip stack of about $3,600 and change. After we paid off our hourly rate and our membership fees, we've had a profit of exactly $6,000. So I'm feeling pretty good about being able to make the comeback after being down quite a bit there at the beginning. Always good to dig yourself out of a hole, and nice, even better to book a win. So.
All right, you guys, it's time to announce the winners of the giveaway. The first place winner is Nate Holt, who's going to be walking away with 5 1-pound bags of gourmet nuts and candies from Lorenta, donated by Sam on the TCH livestream, along with a custom Huggy card protector. The second and third place winners are Jaron Pig and Chris P, who are going to be winning the custom Huggy card protector as well. So congratulations to all the winners. If you didn't win a card protector, check out the merch shop. You can buy one there today, and who knows, I might hold another one of these in the near future, so keep your eye out.
Guys, if you enjoyed the episode, hit the like button down below, leave a comment. That really helps out the channel, helps the YouTube algorithm. And if you watch these regularly, hit the subscribe button too. Either way, I appreciate you watching, and we'll see you on the next one. Take care.